Hi. Today I'm going to be talking about the concept of evil and how one is to become evil. Do we all have a monster within, or do those that commit evil acts learn to become monsters along the way? This question and the overall concept of evil have been pondered since the beginning of time. The way that everyone perceives evil is different, whether it's being looked at in a religious aspect, scientifically, or psychologically. Biologically speaking, the brain of an evil person isn't any different from yours or mine. Some of the most notoriously evil people in the world were perfectly healthy mentally. Some would even argue they were brilliant. Although there has been some connection made between brain damage and issues with performing cognitive functions such as decision making, this is not the cause of someone becoming evil. It has been proven that from infancy, the capacity for knowing right from wrong is present. Because everyone has their own definition of evil and what it takes for someone to be labeled as evil, its definition is truly subjective. Nothing and no one is inherently evil in nature or the universe. Evil is learned, it is not innate. Although I mentioned earlier that everyone has their own understanding of what evil is, the most general definition for the term is profound immorality and wickedness. Pretty much anyone can become evil by exhibiting said horrible, wicked behavior. But how does one get to this point? How does one become evil? Well, the answer is simple. Evil is learned, taught. People are not born with a broken moral compass. The ethics and values you're taught shape the person you are to become. If you're taught the wrong things from an early age, it will show in your personality as you develop. People don't start out this way. That being said, there is no scientific explanation behind evil. It hasn't been scientifically proven that evil even exists. When it all comes down to it, the concept of evil is based on one's morals. There is no medical reason for someone being evil. Evil people don't experience a traumatic brain injury that flips a switch and turns them to the dark side. People with mental illnesses aren't evil. Your personality has everything to do with the way you were raised. Genetics definitely have some influence on the reason you are the way you are, but ultimately, your environment and how you are brought up is the dominant factor in this equation. Think about it this way. If a child is abused or neglected by their parents, this will create anger, frustration, sadness, and resentment towards the people that are supposed to be their heroes, that love them endlessly and would do anything for them. The way these reactions manifest themselves is how these problems can begin. If the only childhood memories you have are bad ones, what response is that going to trigger? I'm sure not a happy one. This continuous cycle of abuse and mistreatment practically forces children to act out as a way to cope. Many of the infamously evil people that have come and gone throughout the history of the world can attest to that. The poster child for evil himself, Adolf Hitler, had a horrible childhood. Not that anything he could have gone through excuses the horrific fate he ensued upon others, but an insight into his childhood at least provides a reason or explanation for why he could have possibly done such a thing. Hitler was mentally sharp and his brain was completely normal from a health standpoint. On the other hand, his childhood was anything but normal. He was verbally and emotionally abused by his father and mother on a daily basis and was deathly afraid of his sister. Not to mention, his father also instilled his hatred of Jews into Adolf from an early age, clearly explaining his intense hatred as an adult. Ted Bundy has a similar story to that of Hitler. Ted Bundy didn't organize a genocide and instruct for the murder of millions of European Jews, but he was definitely evil too. Bundy brutally murdered numerous young women. Although on the outside it seems as if he had the perfect family, which he constantly perpetuated this fantasy, Bundy actually had quite a complicated family life. His mother had him at a young age, and his father was never in the picture. His grandfather in turn raised him as his own as if his mother was his sister and demanded he be seen that way. His grandfather was abusive, and being the dominant presence in his life greatly influenced him. So much so that this behavior manifested itself and ended up being the reason for his committing of these brutal, bizarre acts. After Bundy died, his brain was removed and examined by scientists searching for a reason for his unfathomable deeds. Bundy's brain was perfectly healthy and indicated no signs of trauma, much like what we believe to be that of Hitler's. Neuroscientists have conducted other research and carried out social experiments involving infants, toddlers, and hand puppets. These studies heavily suggest that humans are hardwired for altruism. The Yale Infant Cognition Center conducted a study ultimately showing that toddlers were more inclined to pick kindness by showing them a puppet show with selfish and selfless characters. When later asked which one their favorite was, the overwhelming majority looked to the selfless puppet. Another study done with infants had similar results. A show was performed for them with a red, yellow, and blue character. The overall theme of the show stayed the same in that the red circle was a climber that had been pushed down by one character and was being helped up by another. In the first show, the blue square has pushed down the circle and the yellow triangle is helping. When asked who their favorite was, the majority chose the yellow triangle. In the next show, the roles of the yellow and blue character were reversed, so the blue was now the helper and the yellow was now the hinderer, and the majority chose the blue character as their favorite. Infancy is one of the earliest stages of life. Choices made during this stage don't involve any thinking, seeing as the brain doesn't have the capacity to think yet. Infants are still learning how to make choices, and they, for the most part, chose kindness. Our moral instincts from the moment we're born are good. Over time, things happen that change the way we view and think about things. The competitive nature of the world, abusive households, and even other children in school get in the way of those pure intentions we're born with. Even the worst of us were fundamentally good, but the events we're faced with throughout our lives, the ones that mold us into the fully developed people we are as adults, can turn that around. It is safe to say that the concept of evil has many interpretations. Some would argue that those that perform evil acts are born that way. Others would argue that we are not born evil at all and that it is a learned behavior stemming from our environment and experiences. My hope is that after hearing me speak today, you will go away with the idea that people are not at all born evil, but are born with the intention to do good and be good. The overwhelming majority of evidence points to that conclusion, taking science and years of research into consideration. Some of the most evil minds were born with a similar moral compass to people like you and me. The way we are brought into this world is similar amongst us all, but the way we fit into it is where the diversity comes in. Everyone grows up in a different environment, whether it be a loving home or an abusive one. This is what ultimately shapes the people we become. The things our parents teach us stick with us and reflect onto the way that we act with others and our children. When looking into why an evil person committed an evil act, the ongoing abuse paired with the psychological and biological effects tell it all. This is what really creates a super dangerous person, what creates evil.